Hello, Rabbi.
Hello.
How are you?
Thank God. Good to be back.
It's great to have you back. Ready?
Oh, yeah.
This segment is called For Love or Marriage and Other Misery-Inducing Agencies. L'chaim.
Okay.
It's much better.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about love and marriage.
Yes.
Do the two go together? Do they not? How is it in the secular world versus the orthodox world? How long have you been married?
26 years. So first, I'm going to,
Okay.
this part I was thinking. First of all, I'm not a marriage expert. I'm not a marriage coach. I'm not a marriage therapist.
Neither am
I am not a marriage expert. The only experience I have in marriage is the 26 years I've been married and watching the people around me. So anything that I say today, let's, just take it as a grain of salt, and we'll use it for, conversation and learning experiences. But by no means am I here saying that this is the absolute only way, or these are just observations and my personal feelings on the subject.
Okay.
So,
and I've been married 43 years.
Mazel tov.
I'm almost double than you. So we'll see where this goes.
So let's
let's begin. So is love incorporated in marriage, do you think?
Well, absolutely. I think you have to have love in a marriage. I think the question is, what role should and does love find in a marriage? But I think before we can figure out where love or what role love plays, I think there's a question is, well, what even is marriage? Why even get married?
And what is love? Because I could love chocolate.
That's true too. That's another very important.
I have a hard time with that word love.
Yeah, and that's another very important piece to look, because people say, I love my wife, I love my dog, I love a new pair of shoes, and I certainly hope you love them in different ways. Same word, similar connotation, but I think ultimately they mean and play out in I hope they play out in very different ways. If you love your spouse the way you love a pair of shoes, probably not the healthiest of relationships. So I think, marriage, let's begin at the beginning, right? Okay. So who's the first married couple?
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. How is their relationship described? So the Torah says, the Bible says in Genesis, I believe it's chapter 2, verse 25, or 24, 25, God saw that it wasn't good for man to be alone. He made a partner, and therefore a man should leave his parents' home, his mother and his father's home. He should find a woman, and they should become as one flesh. And then it says they were naked, and they were not embarrassed. Mm-hmm. So that's marriage. So two people come together, and the word love isn't mentioned. Not that they really had a choice. There was slim pickings. It was just one man, one woman. So maybe it was kind of obvious, but be it as it may, the Torah describes their relationship that way. So putting aside for a second, before we really delve into it, I just thought it was interesting looking at it this morning, where it says they were arum, naked, mm-hmm. Or exposed. And I think the connotation there, which is helpful, I think, further in the conversation, is they were exposed, and when you're exposed, you're vulnerable. So they were vulnerable, and they were okay with it. Mm-hmm. That was fine.
But they had nothing else to compare it with.
They had nothing to compare it with. True. But they were okay with it. Mm-hmm. They were okay with being vulnerable. Then, the next verse, chapter 3 begins, there was the snake. Who exactly the snake? What is the snake? That's maybe for a different episode. He was also, it says, he was arum. He was naked, but he was, that's translated as cunning, or he had a certain devious wisdom. So there are a lot of components that go into a relationship. And because of what he did, he eventually created the environment by which Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, and then they realized that they were naked. They realized that they were vulnerable, and then they started covering things up. And then that's kind
sounds like a marriage.
And that's kind of where things, So so we have that's marriage. So, but the point is that a man and a woman get married for no other reason than God created the world and said a man and a woman should be married, and they should become one flesh. Does that that means obviously in the very basic understanding, but also when a man and a woman get together, they have children, and that child represents the one flesh of the two parents. So, on some level, it means to start a family. And so the idea of a marriage is that this is what God asked us to do, and there's an agency in what we do. So when a person is looking to get married, what should the qualities be? What are we looking to do? And a lot of that is influenced by popular culture.
Society,
Movies, books,
right.
Poetry, plays. I'm reminded of
which I find is very deceitful.
Well, it's created as a distraction. It's created to tell a narrative. It's created as a propaganda. The media it has all different agencies that it's employed with. So really, depending on what you're consuming, and it's interesting that there was a young woman, I think it was 1950s, who complained to the Rabbi that she was having some marriage. She was newly married. She was having some difficulties. She was an American. He was European. She was exposed to a more secular education. He had a more traditional education. And the Rabbi said, what should I do that your husband doesn't read romance novels? So, and understanding that's, what exactly was the Rebbe trying to convey? I'm not putting words in his mouth, but what I take from the story is, he was basically explaining that, if our expectations are based on what we're consuming, then that's one thing. So your expectations of marriage are based on what you're reading, and what you're reading is not necessarily.
And your parents' marriage as well.
For sure. And the people around you will have an impact.
Yes.
And I think those are the ones that really should have a greater impact than the ones that you're seeing in the media.
Your parents should.
Your parents, your uncles and aunts, your cousins,
the
community around you.
Yeah.
Both good and bad. If hopefully it's a good marriage. If it's not a good marriage, like what are the things that they're grappling with, and how are they dealing with it? How do they get over things?
I want to touch on the difference between the secular marriages and dating, looking for a mate, and the orthodox. So with the secular, which I'm in, we fall in love and then we get married. I noticed in the orthodox, you get married and then you fall in love, which, being married for 43 years, I agree more with the orthodox than I do with the secular.
Okay. So, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see where it's coming from. So let me just kind of
do a comparison.
Let's open it up a little bit. Let's look at it.
And condense it, yeah.
So in a secular, we're going to call it a secular environment, but in the outside environment, how do you meet somebody? Somebody introduces you, or more likely you just meet in a bar, you meet at a party, you meet at a random
online location. Nowadays.
Online, and there's a physical attraction. So let's look at the word. Well, we said the word love before, right?
Yeah.
So love in Hebrew is ahava. And the center of ahava is hav, to give. Love is in the way, in the Jewish perspective, it's all about giving. When you speak to somebody, as a campus rabbi for a lot of young adults, over the years, for over 25 years of doing this, you have a lot of young people that come to me and say, Rabbi, I met somebody. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm in love with them. It's amazing. It's great. They make me feel great when I'm with them. I said, ooh, this is no good.
Why?
Because if they make you feel good about you when you're with them, what's going to happen when they don't make you feel good when you're with them? In other words, you've met somebody that makes you feel good and you're telling me you're in love with them. What you haven't realized yet is you're in love with yourself. They make you feel good. Because they're making you feel good, you're happy about it. And so we said
and
before,
that's totally opposite of what...
Well, what is love? Love is the feeling like I can have the biggest fight with my spouse yesterday, and I get up today, and my first concern is making sure that I get a cup of coffee for my wife. Not out of a sense of obligation, but because this is the person that I want to get coffee for every single morning. This is the person that I want to take care of. This is the person that I want to give to. Now, how do you get there? How do you get to a place where you're able to be in a relationship that's not based on how they make me feel, but what I'm going to do for them, what they're going to do for me, what we're going to give to each other? That's on the foundational level. Therefore, man should leave his parents' home and find a woman and go and cleave and become one. There's a goal. There's a purpose. It's not about what it's going to do for me, but it's what is my responsibility to the cosmos? What is my responsibility to the creation? Now, because I know what I want to do, I know what I want to build, I know I want to create a family, I know I want to live in a godly, live a godly life, or whatever that might be, because we have the same We have the same interest of what we're creating. The creation of what we are creating becomes the foundation of what we're doing. That ultimately is going to help, with the love, without love. Yeah, love is very important.
So wait
if you
a
don't
minute.
love your spouse.
What you're saying is you have to have the same foundation to start off with, not love, but the same foundation in order to marry this person.
Yes. If you don't want to build the same thing, if one person in the relationship wants to build a family, and the other person wants to create, I don't know, they want to be able to have a good-looking spouse on their shoulder when they go out because they want to be a society, a member of high society. Well, if the husband wants to be part of high society and is looking for a good-looking trophy wife, and the woman wants to create a family and have kids and stay home, they're not creating the same thing. So even if they love each other, ultimately it's never going to work because they're not focusing on building the same thing. They're creating a system of chaos for themselves.
So what should happen then, what you're saying, is we should go out and interview, or first of all, we should know what we want in our spouse, correct?
Yeah, well, we
And
should
in
know what we want out of
ourselves?
life. We should
Out
know,
of life?
Out of life. We should know what is our responsibility to the world, what are we trying to build,
And then find
a partner that wants to build the same thing, and then allow for the love and the respect. And yeah, you need chemistry in a marriage. You need love in a marriage. You need respect in a marriage. All those things, if you don't have those, the marriage is going to suffer greatly. I'm not saying that love is not an important component in marriage, but A, what is love that is in the marriage? And number two is what's the foundation of the marriage? The title, love or marriage or other misery-inducing agencies. If you want to be happy, don't get married. Because marriage might bring some happiness some of the time, but it will also bring a lot of challenges. Same thing. If you want to be happy, don't start your own business. Because if you become an entrepreneur, you will go through many different challenges. That's going to make your life very difficult.
So do you have to be married? Do you have to be happy with yourself first? Or do you have to know how to be happy in order to be in a marriage? Because it's not going to be all, love and chocolates. And
we are always going to face challenges. There's going to be days that we're happy and the days that we're challenged by a lack of happiness. And I don't know that we have to wait until we're perfectly happy with ourselves to get married. But if we know where we want to do, what we want to build, and we can find a person to build that with, then we are going to build it. We are going to become one flesh. We're going to be exposed. We're going to be vulnerable, but it's going to be okay.
What I noticed is in the secular marriage, the divorce rate is like much over 50% now, versus the Orthodox community, not so high in divorces.
It's not so high in divorces because I think there's multiple things. Number one is that you're building a different kind of relationship, and that helps get through challenges.
And what is that different kind of relationship?
It's a focused relationship. What are we building here? What are we doing here? Why are we married? It's interesting that in Judaism, in biblical Hebrew, the word for marriage is kiddushin, which is the same word as kiddusha, holiness. So the word for marriage is the same word for holy, with consecrated, designated. There's something very specific about this. The relationship is more than just two people that are coming together. And you see this also in the Hebrew word for man and woman. Ish for man, isha for woman. Each are three-letter words. The word for man is aleph and shin, which is eish, which is fire, and a yud in between. That's man, ish. Isha is eish, and aleph and a shin again, fire, passion, and a hey. If you take the yud from the man and the hey from the woman, each has passion. Each is a fire. And fire will destroy. Fire is one of the most destructive things on the face of the earth. It has no limits. It has no bounds. It has very few natural enemies. And it can spread. I mean, we saw this a few weeks ago in California. I mean, it can spread, and the destruction is unbelievable. But if you put God's name, the Yud and the Hey, which form together God's name, if you put it in between and you bring it together, then like fire, you can cook with it. You can make things the hardest materials, hardest substance on earth, with fire can become can become soft, they become malleable, they become useful. They can benefit mankind. So if you just have the love, the fire, the passion, that part of a relationship, eventually they will destroy each other. When you have God in between, that serves to temper and bring, and that's the focus that we're talking about. That's the foundation. This marriage is built on foundation. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to work, because that in itself is work.
Right.
Just because there's a notion of something doesn't mean that automatically. So, we're religious, so automatically we're Jewish, so that's the foundation. And you don't have to. No, every day you got to get up, and every day you have to do the work. And there's challenges like every other segment of society.
There's in-laws.
There's in-laws, and there's children, and there's making a living, and then there's health issues, and then there's personality constraints, and then even in the best of marriages, you have two separate people getting together, and you got to figure out how to navigate those things together. But when you know what you're building, like any other project that you have together, you have to collaborate. You want to do something, you bring somebody in. That person has certain qualities why did I bring this person to work with me? Because they have certain qualities that we can get the job done. But they're going to have other qualities that might be challenging.
But let me ask you something. You said earlier that if I love my husband, it's all about me, right? You said at the beginning,
Yep.
All about me. But don't you think that when we have criteria in which to marry somebody, it is about us?
Look, there's always going to be a component that, because we are an active participant. So like I said before, you have to have chemistry. When you go on a date, what are you trying to find out? Well,
nowadays it's nothing. You
in some segments, you're trying to find out, well, what's this person about? Where do they come from? What kind of background do they have? What do they want out of life? So there's, and then eventually, if you have there and the chemistry there, and then it's like, oh, this person's, I'm very attracted to this person, etc. But if you already know where you both want to go, right? You want to get married, you meet people, you start dating. Do they want to get married? Do they want to have a family? Do they want to have a religious what are they looking for in life? But in a more religious context where people are introduced to each other to date, they're not introduced, say, hey, you guys are getting engaged, have a good day. People introduce and then they date and they see it. But you already know that a lot of those finer details have been before two people are introduced. They've been worked through. So you want to say, is there chemistry? Can I talk to this person? Do I enjoy being with this person? Because if you don't have that, there's no relationship. But the notion of love, I love this person, that comes later. Love is a deep-seated respect that you have for a person by observing how they behave to the world, to themselves, to their spouse. Love is something which is earned over a period of time. That's true love.
Yeah.
What we talk about as love is really an infatuation. I see a person and this person makes me so excited about myself. Okay, so it's an infatuation. You love yourself and that person makes you feel good, so it's going to be good. That's not enough for a marriage. That shouldn't even be enough for dating. That should be something which comes at a much later stage when you've been with the person, you see the person, you've experienced the person, and sometimes that comes, in stages. First there's a respect, there's a mutual respect, there's chemistry and all the other little components that you have, and then the love actually builds with the relationship. When you see and you're building and you're creating that kind of respect. And look, you speak to anybody who's been married for a period of time, and you say, do you love your spouse the same way that you did 25 years ago or when you just met? And the answer, I hope, is going to be no.
No.
It's a lot more. It's a lot deeper.
We change, we grow,
And our concept of love has changed.
Yes.
So if we can take that mature concept of love and give that to the kids, say, this is what you should be looking for in a marriage. You need to get it there. But you're not going to start off.
So what's a mature love concept, would you say?
Is being with somebody that you want to take care of because you see and appreciate that person for who they are.
So take your eyes off of yourself.
Take your eyes off yourself.
So that's a form of maturity. Big maturity, I believe.
I would hope so.
Well, because society is all about me, 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 me.
Well, yeah.
And
do they make you happy?
Right.
Well, like we said before, the agency of misery. There's going to be days that your spouse will not make you happy. There's going to be challenges that you're going to experience differently, and you're going to butt heads. And the most important thing is, how do you fight? Do you become vindictive? Mm-hmm. Does the spouse become vindictive and nasty and mean? when you get along, people say, "Oh, I met somebody that we get along so well. It's always amazing. It's always, oh, okay, this is, come back, have a fight, have a disagreement, and then you'll tell me, when things are going well, things are going well. Like, of course, it's going well. It's going well. What is it to say? But how are things when things are not going well?
Oh, I like the. What is that analogy of a pocket? What is it, Rabbi? Come on. There's a drink, a pocket, something about money, a drink.
Not familiar with
it. What is somebody like when they're drunk? Because their true essence comes out when they're drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Money. How do they treat money? That's very interesting as well. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. And look, marriages, the topic is love and marriage. There are many components that go into a marriage. So if we were talking about what are the things you need to have a great marriage, well, that would be another conversation. Like, how does one build a marriage? We're talking here about love and marriage. Do they go together like a horse and, song, do they go together like a horse and carriage? A horse and a carriage have nothing in common. They don't go together. Mm-hmm. One is an inanimate object. One is a living being. One is created solely for the purpose of transporting people and goods. The other is there because God created horses to eat hay and live a good life. Mm-hmm. They certainly weren't. If a horse can talk, I don't think they would say, "Oh yeah, I was created, merely for the use of man to be able to schlep things and pull them around." Yet, the horse, which really can do nothing on its own other than eat grass and run around the Wild West, and a carriage really can't do anything. But if you put them together, then they both can become more useful than they ever were together. So, love and marriage don't go together like a horse. Just as a horse and carriage don't go together. But if you have a good marriage and you have the love that comes with the marriage, and then you can harness it and you can do a lot of other great things.
But I also noticed that in the Orthodox community, the word dating, I'm just going to use that loosely. How long did you know your wife before you married her? That's a very short time. How do you get to know them in such a short amount of time?
Well,
how long were you together before you got married?
We dated for a few weeks,
and then you decided to get married.
Yeah, but
a few weeks. That's unheard
hold on.
of.
But let's take a step, okay?
Okay.
When people date, yeah. So somebody meets somebody. Let's say at a bar, at an event, at a party. Somebody's introduced to somebody. For the first, how often can you go out in the beginning? I don't want to seem too desperate. I don't want to seem not interested. So is it once a week? Is it twice a week? A little older. I have jobs. I have commitments and things like that. What are you finding out on the first date?
Secularly?
Yeah,
nothing.
And the second and the third.
Nothing.
So before a relationship, before you're even dating, could take a few months. And then when you start dating, if it formally turns into that, then what are you trying to figure out? Have you met the family yet? What do you know about the person? When can you have a serious conversation? People date for years and never have a serious conversation about what kind of.
And then they end up sleeping together.
Then
and then that's a whole mess.
And then
when they split up
or moving in together.
Oh.
So let's look at if you.
So what did you talk about when you were for those 3 weeks before you decided to get married? And what made you decide to her?
Life, family, visions, goals, ideas, concepts. Getting to real conversation, getting to know the person.
Where did you
about
meet your
experience.
wife? Where'd you meet your wife?
We were introduced by somebody that we both knew, and we dated in New York. We went either to a hotel lounge and had some drinks.
A lobby, not in the not
like in the lobby hotel, had some drinks, or we went to we drove around. I mean, the conversations are very real, very quick, because you both know that you're dating to get married. If I don't feel the chemistry, you stop. If I'm not interested in this person, the person bores me. I have no idea what.
Whereas in the secular, they date and they say, "Well, I guess I'll marry you because I
It
like.
could. Well, at some point, I'm like, I've been in a relationship for so long. The only natural place for this to go is. So I mean, look, there's a lot of ways that you can have a bad marriage, or a lot of bad reasons to get married. A lot of bad roads lead to marriage. But I think ultimately, when there's a focus on what are we doing here, why are we going out, why are we here together, and you've already kind of stripped away a lot of the outside things. Is this person, are you religiously compatible, more or less? Obviously nobody knows before you go out. You got to go out, you got to talk, you got to speak, you got to figure it out. But more or less, like, hey, I know somebody, and I know a guy, and I know a young woman, and I think their personalities would be very good together. I like them both. I'm going to put them together and let them talk it through. But you've already waded through a lot of the just the fluff,
Nonsense.
the fluff and the nonsense. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, look, let's use an analogy. If you needed to buy something for the studio, okay, a specific piece of a camera equipment, or computer equipment, or something, or lighting, or something like that, you can go to Amazon, and you can spend days searching on Amazon through tens of thousands of things that are completely unrelated to what you're looking for, and hopefully you'll find it, and you probably eventually will because they sell everything on Amazon, and then you'll buy it. But you'll have wasted a lot
You
of
will
time.
also get misdirected. Oh, that looks good.
You'll get a lot of problems.
Dating. Oh, this looks interesting over here. So you miss
the picture.
you're not in the track. Yeah.
If you need a piece of equipment, you go to an electronics store, you go to a broadcast, a place that specializes in this equipment, and you find it. Maybe it's a few dollars more, or not that, but you know that they have exactly what you need. You know it's going to work, and that, in a way, it's kind of the same thing. If you just date and then just kind of meet somebody somewhere, and you have no idea about anything, you have no idea where they come from, what their background is, or anything like that, you have to literally learn and kind of spend all that time trying to figure out, is this even a person I want to date? Whereas in the traditional Jewish setting, it's, I know this is the person. I know already that there's enough over here that I want to date. So this is a date. This is a real date. And then that's why it goes so much quicker. So how can you do so quickly? It's not. It's just truncated. Because if I would venture to bet, and I've never done a study, but it would be interesting if somebody did a study, is to take couples that have gotten married in a more secular environment and break down their dating. How long did they actually date before they decided to get married? Meaning, how long was the period where they were seriously dating and going out and focusing on the future and asking those questions and getting rid of all of the periphery, dating that they have, and focus. How long was that period? And I would actually say it's probably not much longer than in a religious Jewish dating.
Very short in the Jewish, orthodox setting. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. This is great.
You're welcome.
All right. L'chaim
L'chaim.
to marriage.
L'chaim to marriage. The happy marriages.
A happy marriage.
Full of love.
Amen. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And we'll see you next time.
God willing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.